So I've just said to Charlotte, we're being pulled over by the police. And she went, oh my God, were you speeding? Now, these two of the German vehicles I absolutely love and wish I owned them. And both of them here. And the first one is a little Kettengrag. Good morning and welcome to Wednesday. So today is actually February the 14th, so it's Valentine's Day. So my present to my wife on Valentine's Day is I'm going to take her to a museum. Not just any museum, I'm going to take her to the Atlantic Wall Museum because after the visits to the batteries, I suddenly realise I don't really know that much about them like I should do. I know what they did and I know how they were built, but don't really know the insides of them. And the Atlantic Wall Museum will do that for me because it's pretty much laid out how it was during World War II. And also, 2 days ago was its 82nd birthday. But obviously, I haven't just bought my wife a ticket to go to a museum and see a big bunker. I got her some champagne and stuff before we came. And a card, obviously. Handmade, I will have you know. Anyway, let's get on with it and get to this museum. So, something really strange has just happened to us on the way to the Todt Battery or the Atlantic Wall Museum. So we're driving down the country lanes doing the speed limit, and I know I was doing less than the speed limit because I've put it to kilometers an hour, remember? So we're just driving down this country lane and I could sense there was a car right up my backside, which I don't like people who drive right up your backside. So I was very aware of this van, and it was a Berlingo van, a grey Berlingo van. Now I don't have a rear view mirror in this van, but I could see in my side mirrors that it was this grey Berlingo van and it was very, very close. So anyway, the speed limit kind of changed from 30 kilometers an hour to 80 kilometers an hour. And because I was concentrating on this van right up my backside, I didn't really put my foot down. I stayed around about 30 kilometers an hour, which next minute, blue lights flashing in my mirrors. So we were right near the Channel Tunnel entrance. So I've just said to Charlotte, we're being pulled over by the police. And she went, oh my God, were you speeding? No, 80 kilometers an hour and I was doing 40. No, I wasn't. So I knew I definitely wasn't speeding. So I've just pulled over on this grass verge and the van pulled up right behind us. And a copper got out. Well, it looked more like a soldier got out than a copper because he was in full camouflage uniform with a machine gun on his back and a pistol. Now, I do know the National Gendarmerie wear camouflage uniform, not like the average police. And I knew he was a copper because it said policey on his uniform here. So I wound the window down and he was going to Charlotte's side because he must have thought we were a left-hand drive. So I shouted out the window, bonjour monsieur, and he kind of come to my side of the van and he just said bonjour, and I said parlez-vous anglais, giving him my best French. No, he says no. So I knew I was on a winner then because he can't speak English and my French is rubbish. So he chatted for a little bit and we kind of worked out that he wanted to know how long we've been going, how long we've been driving. So I just said we've been driving 10 minutes and I did my deux, trois, quatre. So he knew we hadn't been driving long. Then next minute, another one appears at the window. So we've now got two fully armed National Gendarmerie staring at me through this window. asking me questions which I didn't understand. I kind of did. I knew what he was after. Anyway, he asked for my passport, which I didn't have. And then the other one asked driving license, said driving license. So I gave him my driving license. Luckily enough, I always carry my driving license. So he kind of looked at my driving license and then said, he pointed at the back. He wanted me to get out and open the sliding doors at the back to see what was in there. Now, luckily enough, the boys have stayed at home, so they weren't in the back. They were playing on the PlayStation. They didn't want to come to the museum, so it was empty. So as I got out of the van and opened the sliding door, all of a sudden 2 others appeared. So now I've got 4 fully armed to the teeth in camouflage uniform National Gendarmerie surrounding me. So I opened the sliding door. They all had a look in and was a bit disappointed, I think, because there was nobody in the back. Then one of them who just arrived pointed to the back doors. Open. He said open. So I opened the back doors. There's nothing in there. It's completely empty except my spare tyre, my spare alloy wheel. And he went, go, go, go. I think he was a bit disappointed that there was nobody in the back or anything was in the back. So we're just on our way now to the battery, and it's got us thinking, why have they pulled over a van with Tomcat gas trading on the back of it, English registration plates, and a big sticker what says UK on it? Why have they done that? Do they think we're bringing in illegal immigrants, or are we transporting drugs? That's the only thing we can come up with, is that they think we're drugs dealers or people traffickers. But got back in the van, seatbelt on, window up, went to set off. One of them jumped in front of the traffic, bearing in mind they were around about 80 kilometers an hour where we are. He jumped in front of him and stuck his hand out and stopped these 3 cars, and then waved me out into the traffic, and then gave us a little wave as we drove off. I could see him in the mirrors. Weird. Really, really weird. Did I poop my pants? Well, I felt quite comfortable, really, especially when I said parlez-vous anglais and he said no. So I knew I was on a winner there. I knew I wasn't speeding. So I kind of was just like, why have they pulled me up? Anyway, that's our little story of being pulled over by the National Gendarmerie on our way to the Todt battery. Anyway, let's get to the battery. This is the Museum of the Atlantic Wall, which in World War II was a major gun battery. The battery consists of 4 Krupp 380mm or 15-inch guns with a range of up to 55.7 kilometres or 34.6 miles. They were capable of reaching the British coastline, and each were protected by a bunker of reinforced concrete. In August 1940, construction started on Tower 1, where thousands of pieces of iron were required and 29 concrete mixers. To get the batteries up and running as soon as possible, OT brought in tens of thousands of workers. They used their own soldiers, the French public, and also forced labourers. Over the 2 years, they would use 190,000 cubic metres of concrete and use over 120,000 tonnes of iron and steel. Construct the bunkers for the massive guns. The whole area just became a massive construction site for 2 years. To install these huge guns, they also needed a huge crane to install them. The crane was able to lift the 105-ton gun with its carriage. The naval guns were assembled at the Krupp factory in the Ruhr and then shipped to the site by train and road. These were the same guns that was used on the battleship Bismarck. On October the 8th, 1940, barely 3 months after work had started, the guns were already installed and test fired. Now the guns had been installed, the battery had to be completed. First of all, they made a steel frame and then covered it in concrete. This would then protect the guns from aerial bombing. The battery was built at an incredible pace. All 4 batteries was completed by February 1942. To camouflage the batteries from the air, the Germans actually covered them with nets and even planted a forest around the batteries, which is still there today. To operate the guns, it required 400 Kriegsmarine who lived in barracks close by. The firing cabin of the gun is made of armoured steel and weighed approximately 500 tons. This is the actual armoured door off the 380mm gun turret, which weighs approximately 500 kilograms on its own. And here you can see exactly how thick the steel is. You can see here how the sailors entered the turret through this door. Adolf Hitler even came to see the construction of the battery on the 23rd of December 1940. Franz Todt was a general and engineer and a close friend of Adolf Hitler, and in 1933 Hitler gave him the responsibility of building the motorways in Germany in order to reduce the number of the unemployed. In 1935 he created the military and civilian organisation to which was given the name Organisation Todt. He then built the Barrier Siegfried Line in a view of the Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of England. This was then abandoned by Hitler in 1940 to concentrate on the defence called the Atlantic Wall fortifications. Fritz Todt, Reich Minister of Armaments and Munitions, died in an air crash at Hitler's Wolf Lair, the headquarters on the Eastern Front, on the 8th of February 1942. The Junkers J-52 in which the doctor was travelling mysteriously crashed when taking off. There were no survivors. On the 10th of February 1942, the battery Siegfried became the battery Todt in honour of the constructor. So right at the entrance of the museum you will find this, which is part of the propeller of a Wellington bomber which crashed nearby. Now because of the terrible weather, we will have a look in the casemate first before we look at the railway gun. On the 28th of September 1944, the Todt battery was attacked by the North Nova Scotia Highlanders, the 9th Brigade of the 3rd Canadian Infantry. The attack started at 6:35 in the morning and by 10:30 it was all over. All this damage you've seen on the outside of the casemate was created by the Canadians in the attack. So let's get through these huge doors and have a look around. So the first thing we come across is one of the shells that the guns fired. So the caliber of these shells was 380mm, they weighed 800 kilograms each. The total height of the shell was 1 meter 68 centimeters and a range of 42 kilometers. They had firing rate of 6 rounds per hour with an average speed of 820 meters per second. So as we pass a shell on the left hand side, we're then met by this poster, which is basically telling us to follow the blue arrows around the place. Here we see a brilliant example of one of the doors. Now the Germans were obsessed with gas attacks in the Second World War, and they thought their bunkers were going to be attacked all the time. So these doors were not just made to withhold a blast, they was also designed to stop any gas entering the bunker. What they also did was put the room under positive pressure so it would also stop the gas being sucked into the room. And as you can see here on the door, there is also a port for shooting through. When you first walk in, you will also see this propaganda what's been saved by not painting over it. You can see the translation underneath, but there were lots of propaganda paintings around the bunkers, but there is only 2 left in this bunker. But you still can see some of the other propaganda paintings in the other bunkers which have not been turned into a museum. Now we're in the rotunda. This room is 29 metres in diameter. The walls and the roof are 3.5 metres thick and all made of reinforced concrete. Now this is one of the other 3 casemates which haven't been turned into a museum, but this will give you an idea exactly how big and how deep this gun pit actually is. It's colossal. You can't really tell from the video and the photographs exactly how big this is until you either stood in front of it or you're looking down into it. It's huge. Against the back wall of the gun pit there are these displays in glass cases showing loads of different equipment. There are a couple of German Luftwaffe or Air Force uniforms, and there's also a British RAF uniform. Now during the war, a lot of people think it was all mechanised, especially Blitzkrieg at the beginning of the war, but actually there was a lot of horses used and a lot of carriages all the way through the war. The German army entered World War II in 1939 with 514,000 horses, and over the course of the 6 years of the war they employed a total of 2.75 million horses and mules. The average number of horses in the army reached 1.1 million. Now these 2 of the German vehicles I absolutely love and wish I owned them, and both of them here. And the first one is a little Kettenkrag. So it's not a tank and it's not a motorbike, it's a Kettenkrag. Amazing piece of machinery which had just a car engine in it. Designated SDK-FZ2 by the German army, the Kettenkrad was an ingenious half-tracked motorcycle, hence the name. Ketten meaning tracks, Krad meaning Kraftrad or motorcycle. The Kettenkrad was designed and built by the NSU factory in Germany and patented in June 1939. It was first used in the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941 by paratroopers. As well as the Kettenkrad, the Germans also had standard motorbikes. This is a BMW R35. The German Wehrmacht used the BMW models R4, R12, R23 and R35. This is the R75 sidecar, which was literally unstoppable until it encountered the snowdrifts outside Stalingrad in Russia. In wartime, the British and Canadians used a lot of different motorcycles. They were US and British built motorcycles. They used Harley Davidsons, Indians, Nortons, Matchless and Birmingham Small Arms or BSA motorbikes. This bike is a Harley Davidson. So if we take another look at this exhibition, it gives us another idea exactly how large this gun pit is. Above the exhibition you can see 2 rows of openings which allowed the evacuation of the air blasts when the guns were fired. Located on the extreme right, the 2 large openings were used to bring ammunition in when they were test firing the guns. When the battery was on alert, the shells were delivered via a lift. You can see from this information board here that the gun room was split into 2 sections. Obviously the big section where the gun is and the second section where they kept the projectiles and the powder bags. So you can see above the door here there is a gap, and then there is a rail which is connected to the ceiling which runs around from the powder room to the gun room. Now the reason for the gap in the door is because they had a little hoist connected to the rail to aid them move the shells and the powder bags around the room. They then took them to an airlock. This kept the shells and the powder bags separate from the magazine. They then placed them onto little carts and pushed them towards the turret. The shells and the powder bags then went onto a hoist
which took them up to the back end of the turret. They had to make sure the shell and the charge was pointed in the right direction, or otherwise once they get into the turret they would be pointing the wrong way of going into the barrel of the gun. They then went on this table which brought them to the right height of the breech of the gun, and then using a ramrod they then shoved in the shell and the powder bags. The gun is now ready to be fired. Now, being a plumber and gas engineer, I always like to include our electrician friends, so here's a bit of electrical work from World War II. So what was life like in the barracks? These blockhouses formed part of the German coastal artillery under the command of the Kriegsmarine, so the navy, not the army. This is why the terms crew, galley and seamen are used rather than garrison, kitchen and soldiers. The commander of the Todt battery was only a lieutenant. A consignment of 18 seamen and 1 officer maintained the bunker, the seamen being stationed in various blockhouses or barrack rooms, and the officer occupying a small private room like we've got here. The men were based here for 6 months period and worked in watches of various tasks relating to what they were doing in the bunker. To power the casemate, there is a Derek 36 kilovolt generator. Derek is actually a Champagne region in France. It weighs approximately 10 tons and it provided independent electrical power to the blockhouse for lighting, for the gun machinery and to operate the ventilation machines. This generator unit was supplied with diesel via these 2 tanks situated on the right, offering a total constant supply of 6,750 litres. These tanks were filled through the inlet valves located at the entrance to the blockhouse. After the war, the generator was put into service at the port of Boulogne-sur-Mer. After being abandoned, it was brought back and restored to its wartime position. Depending on the size of the bunker will depend on whether the bunker had just stoves in them or it had one of these coal-fired boilers running central heating. They also had hot and cold running water and showers and full flushing toilets. They even had urinals. Now the rain has stopped. Let's have a look at the exhibits outside. This is a hedgehog, which is a beach defensive obstacle, which was designed to stop the Allied troops during D-Day gaining a foothold on the beaches. But that's what everybody thinks, but really they were invented by the Czechoslovakians to use on the German-Czech border to stop the Germans invading Czechoslovakia. But when the Germans did, they saw them, nicked them, and then used them all along the Atlantic Wall to hinder the Allied troops when landing on the beaches. When the Allies invaded, they actually cut up the hedgehogs and welded them onto the front of the Sherman tanks to use them as hedgerow cutters. They were invented by Curtis G. Cullen, a sergeant in the 2nd Armoured Division of the 102nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron. Another beach obstacle was the tetrahedron, again used by the Germans, placed across the Atlantic Wall to counter the Allied landings. They were part of the entire defensive system that included barbed wire, which was called Rommel's spaghetti, big wooden poles or stakes in the sand, and the Belgium gates. This is the Belgium gate. It was nicknamed this because the Germans, again, nicked them from Belgium. They were manufactured by the French and they were intended to protect Belgium from a German invasion. Again, used along the Atlantic Wall as a beach obstacle to hinder the Allies. This one was found on the beach at Wissant, where we are staying, by a group of Cherbourg mine clearance experts during a mine clearing operation in October 2014. Remember when I told you Kettenkrad was one of my favourite German vehicles? Well, the other favourite German vehicle is the one we're looking at now. This is the German half-track designated SD KFC 251. It weighs 8,000 kilograms. Its armour is 6 to 12.5 millimeters thick. Its engine is a Tatra diesel 8-cylinder or 11,750 centimeters cubed. It has a crew of 12 persons, an operating range of 600 kilometers, has a top speed of 60 kilometers an hour, and its fuel consumption is 30 to 40 litres per 100 kilometers. This is a Flak 88, which is an 88mm anti-aircraft gun used by the Germans, but not just for shooting aircraft. They also used it as an anti-tank gun. A lot of the time these guns were towed by the half-tracks we've just been looking at. They even put them on top of half-tracks to make them even more mobile. The gun was manufactured by Krupp, no surprise there. Its calibre was 88mm, its firing range was 12 to 15 rounds a minute. It weighs 4,500 kilograms, it has a maximum range of 15,000 meters, and its initial speed of the projectile is 800 to 1,000 meters per second. Now this casemate is Colossus. Now it's probably the biggest casemate I have seen in all my trips to France to look at these gun emplacements. It's huge! The tote battery consists of 4 casemates. Each casemate consists of 2 parts. The firing chamber, which housed a 38cm SKC/34 naval gun, under an armoured turret. This casemate is 47 meters long, 29 meters wide and 20 meters high. 8 of those high meters are underground. Besides the 4 casemates, there was also a system of buildings. There was 14 passive bunkers, 4 barracks, a belt of 15 trabrucs, 3 bunkers with anti-aircraft guns facing south and directed towards the interior of the coast, 9 pieces of anti-aircraft guns of French origin installed at the centre of the battery, a drinking water pumping station, a hospital bunker, and a pre-existing farm between casemate 2 and casemate 3 integrated into the defensive system to serve as barracks and an observation post. This casemate might be huge, but the Canadian soldiers still did a pretty good job at damaging it. This is Leopold, one of 8 produced of Krupp's K5 railway guns. Hitler wanted to invade the UK, which he called Operation Sea Lion. Before Hitler could invade England, he needed to have full control of the French coast and the English Channel. But during the summer of 1940, Hitler's mega batteries were still not completed. So between Calais and Boulogne, Hitler would install 6 of the new K5 railway guns. They could fire 280mm shells at the rate of 6 per hour, with an impressive range of 60 kilometres. The guns weren't perfect, but were able to fill in until the batteries were up and running. The barrel of the gun was 21.5 metres or 71 feet long, and the barrel weighed 94 tonnes. It had a calibre of 283mm and a shell weighed 243 kilograms. We had a rate of fire of 15 rounds per hour, and the shell could reach 151 kilometres or 94 miles. The overall length was 41.2 metres, including the railway cars. The overall width was 2.6 metres, and it had a mass of 218 tonnes. 2 of the K5 guns, one named Robert and this one Leopold, were shipped to Italy to help counter the Allied landings at a town called Anzio in February 1944. The Allied soldiers stuck on the beach nicknamed the 2 guns Anzio Annie and Anzio Express due to the express train-like sound the shells generated. On the 18th of May 1944, the guns fired off their last ammunition and were destroyed by their crews. Now we're on top, let's talk about how they loaded the guns. The crew would first hoist up the 243 kilogram shell by this little crane and then place it onto this little bogie. The shell will be then pushed by 2 crew members to the breech of the gun. The shell would then be placed on the loading arm trolley and pushed through the breech into the gun itself. The crew will then use this ramming rod to shove the shell and the powder bags into the correct position. The breech would then be closed, but as you can see from this picture, this is how the crew damaged this gun by removing the breech. The gun was then aimed and fired, but this gun could not traverse, it could only elevate. So they had to make sure that the tracks were in the right location to be able to shoot the guns at the UK. So that was our visit to Battery Todt and to see the railway gun Leopold.
Good morning and welcome to our final full day here in France. So today we've saved the biggie till the last because we're going to Fort Todt. It's got a Z at the beginning of it, but they don't say it's Todt. To help us English out, they call it the Eastern Battery, and it's part of the Fort Dunes. So it's a massive complex, and it's just further up from the port of Dunkirk, and it's going to take us around about an hour to get there. And then there's about a 20-minute walk, everybody seems to say, where the car park is, up to where all the gun emplacements are. And quite a few of the gun emplacements have fallen off the top of the hill and ended up on the beach. So this is going to be incredibly interesting to see, and quite a huge place, I believe. So let's get on with it and get this hour drive over and done with. The sun's just come out because it's been absolutely chucking it down this morning, so hopefully this will continue and it's not too blowy when we get onto the beach.
And we have arrived at this beach at Dunkirk, so you will be able to just see the harbour in the distance down there.
Now we've arrived at the beach at Dunkirk, just here at the side of me, but just a few things to bear in mind. First of all, the soldiers who were evacuated from the BEF, the British Expeditionary Force, were not taken from the beach here. It was a lot further up there where you can see the port in the distance. And also, this beach was not taken during 6th of June 44 D-Day because one, Normandy's miles back down that way, and two, if they did try and take this beach on D-Day, it would have been a bloody massacre, because when we get down here and we see the fort and the gun emplacements, you will see trying to take this beach by the sea would be virtually impossible with the amount of armour that would be here. Now, also, why people say, why didn't it bombard the soldiers on the beach when they were being taken off on the evacuation? It wasn't built. The fort, the Dunes fort was here, or Fort Dune was here. It's been here since about 1877, but the German gun emplacements weren't here till 1942. So they wouldn't have been firing at the soldiers being evacuated off the beach. So just a few things to bear in mind.
For 9 days, between the 26th of May and the 4th of June 1940, 338,000 British and French troops were hemmed in at Dunkirk. During this time, several French divisions put up a heroic defence of Dunkirk. This gave the British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, time to deploy Operation Dynamo. Around 340,000 British and French troops were removed off the beaches. A flotilla of around 850 ships evacuated the soldiers back to the UK. So if you come down that incredibly substantial ramp, you will bump into the first bunker. And it's not a 20-minute walk, it's a 5-minute walk. Now this is so hard to comprehend that coastal erosion and the force of the sea has done this to the bunker when they weigh so much. It's just incredible that this could be moved off its foundations. Anyway, that's the first one. Let's go and check out these others. The battery was built by the French Navy to protect Dunkirk from attacks from the British fleet. Recognising its strategic position, the French modernised the fort in 1939 before the start of the Second World War. 1 year later, in the spring of 1940, the fort was captured by the Germans after a series of attacks by Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers. The Germans further updated the fort and incorporated it into the Atlantic Wall. It boasts a battery of 4 gun casemates, along with 1 fire control bunker. Several crew bunkers and ammunition bunkers were also located at the site. The battery guns dated from 1902 and had a calibre of 194mm. After the D-Day landings, the Canadians laid siege to the city, but the fortress itself did not surrender until May the 9th, 1945, where 10,000 Germans were taken prisoner. The day after the Germans surrendered and was signed, Canadian forces promptly occupied the fort and their engineers destroyed the guns. Listen. It's deathly quiet here, so except for the birds. No wind. This place is phenomenal. And no wonder we didn't attack this place, because like I said before, it would have just been a massacre. Now, the reason why you can see these bricks are yellow in colour, that was camouflage. So when the planes flew over the top, they just thought it was the sand. So they even thought about that. Just amazing. The regal bow concept of bunkers embraced only permanent construction which came in multiple Bustacker or building strengths. These types were all made of reinforced concrete or reinforced concrete with an outer casing of Formstein, which means concrete prefabricated blocks, or a combination of both. The bunkers we have here are one of the most common types of Bustacker B buildings, which featured ceilings and walls of 200 centimetres thick and a floor of 80 centimetres thick. The construction was sufficient enough to protect from the effects of a half-ton aerial bomb on the roof or a hit from 220mm artillery shells. So that is the end of our little trip to France. Hopefully you've liked the video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers! Bye. Hey, Rosie.
Shall we go home? Shall we go home? Go and get in. Sit down in there.